Roberto from Queens. I saw a clip of Paul Heyman saying that he was made an offer to join the WWF in the early 90s. He would be brought in as a protege to Bobby Heenan and be part of the Heenan family, eventually turning on Bobby, stealing the family away from him, and turning Bobby babyface. How do you feel this would have turned out, and how much would history have changed if Heyman took this offer? So what he's referring to is a story that Heyman told during an Inside the Ropes Q&A that he did in Manchester back in 2016. I had never heard the story before he told it. Heyman was working for WCW at the time, and he had the opportunity to jump ship to the WWF in early 1992. Now, the timeline on this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying the entire story is made up. He may just have his timeline all screwed up. But the idea, according to him, was Bobby the Brain Heenan was going to bring in Paul Heyman, or Paul E. Dangerously, as he was at the time. Maybe not under that name, but Heyman would be brought in as Heenan's protege. And he would be, I think he said, the executive vice president of the Heenan family, right? Or whatever the title would be. With the idea that he eventually screws Bobby or manipulates Bobby out of the Heenan family. And he makes it the Heyman family. And it turns Heenan babyface in the process. Bobby would then have about a year-long run as a babyface, and then he would go on to exclusively do commentary with Gorilla Monsoon. But Kip Fry, who was in charge of WCW at the time, for a very brief period of time, he didn't last long in the role before he got replaced by Bill Watts, told Heyman, name your price. What's it going to take to keep you? And Heyman didn't think he would go for it, but he claims he told him, okay, I'll stay if you make me an employee. And Fry told him, great, you'll have your contract assigned tomorrow. And that's why Heyman stayed. Right? How could he say no to that? He claims that made him the first non-announcer performer in the history of the company to ever be made an employee, because everyone else was an independent contractor. And so that's why he stayed. I'm not so sure that someone like Flair or Dusty, didn't at some point have those same privileges that come with employee status given their roles on the creative team. Was Heyman the first? Maybe he thought he was the first. I'm not so sure I believe that, but that's what he claimed. I love the idea of Heenan and Heyman working together. My God, the two greatest managers of all time. It's Heenan, it's Heyman, and then Jim Cornette. So that would have been incredible. And the idea of Heyman usurping him as the leader, again, the timeline makes no sense to me if we're talking 1992, because Heenan had already been done with managing by that point. But in 91, I think the fall of 91, because he was put with Flair initially, and then it was too much for him being on the road with Flair, and that's when he basically stopped being a manager at that point. But what I don't like is the idea of Bobby Heenan as a babyface. It just feels wrong to me. He should never be a babyface. Never. Never, ever, ever. I mean, look, I guess if you were going to do it, though, doing it at the very end of his run as a manager would have made the most sense. I guess there would have been no harm in it for a year, but he needed to be a heel if he was going to do commentary with Gorilla Monsoon. Otherwise, the dynamic between them just doesn't work. Kevin from Washington, D.C. With the amount of talent in the women's division in WWE, along with the mid-card championships turning the corner in terms of their directions, can an argument be made that the women are more over collectively than the men are? So this was an interesting question. I wanted to make sure I answered this one here. My question to you, when you say that, my question to you is very simple. Are they selling more tickets? How's the Evolution show doing? Do their segments do higher numbers than the men? Are they moving more merch collectively? I don't know. I don't have those metrics in front of me right now. But to me, that's how you determine who's over and who's not. Rhea Ripley is legitimately in the top mix of stars, male or female, in the company in terms of like top tier stars. Her popularity is off the charts, especially her social media numbers. Collectively, they have a lot of popular females right now. Io Sky is pretty popular. Stephanie Vicaire hasn't even been on the main roster very long, but she's very popular. But how do you measure this? How do you determine how over they are? You have to look at the numbers. I can't say they're more over than the men. Are they more over than John Cena? Are they more over than CM Punk? Are they more over than Jey Uso? I don't think so. They have plenty of talent in the division, but I can't sit here and tell you that, collectively right now, the women are more over than the men. I don't know what you can point to base that on. William from Calgary. Now that Ron Killings is officially back in WWE, do you see a possibility that he will become undisputed WWE champion in the year 2026, breaking Mr. McMahon's record as the oldest WWE champion of all time? No. Shiamo from South Africa. In hindsight, do you think the Invasion storyline should have been saved for 2002? You kick off with Ric Flair coming in and then the NWO and everyone else. Rock and Austin were both babyfaces at the time. You could have gone to WrestleMania 18 with Team WWE being Rock, Austin, Angle, Taker, and Kane against Team WCW represented by the NWO, Flair, and DDP. The last part of what you said there is not a good idea because I don't know why you would do a match like that at WrestleMania. WrestleMania 18 should not be some big 10-man tag. I mean, it's WrestleMania. You got to have these guys in singles matches up and down the card. WrestleMania 18, if they played their cards right, could have been the first big WWF, WCW supercard, right? That's what that should have been. And it would not have just been exclusively WWF against WCW. You could have had some WWF matches on the undercard. That's what you should have done with WrestleMania 18. And as far as, doing the Invasion in 2002, should it have been saved for then? Yes. Once they had access to more bigger names, that's when you kick off a proper invasion. If you're going to do an invasion storyline of WCW invading WWE, you can't do it with Booker T and DDP. I'm sorry. And I like DDP and I like Booker T. That's not going to work. Booker T, DDP, and then all of the lower to mid card guys from WCW. Fucking 3 Count and Chronic and Lance Storm. Give me a break. You're going to build an invasion around that when you have guys like Hogan and Hall and Nash and Flair and Bischoff and Steiner and Goldberg, Luger, Sting, none of whom came in right away. Once you have access to a decent number of them, what you do, I don't even think you don't even kick off the invasion with Flair. You kick it off with Bischoff and the NWO. Bischoff leading the NWO into an invasion of the WWF. And then at that point, I mean, we could talk about where do you go from there? Do all the ex-WCW guys kind of join in with the NWO? Because that would be weird. Flair with the NWO being on the same side, I mean, there's different ways you could have gone with it at that point, but see, I would have had Bischoff lead the NWO, and that's how you kick off the invasion. And then you build to a big supercard at WrestleMania the following year. So I guess that would have been, if they kicked the angle off in 2002, you save the supercard for WrestleMania 19. If you kick it off in 2001, you could do the supercard at WrestleMania in Toronto.